This is Talk TV. Now joined in the studio by the secret millionaire and entrepreneur, Mike Greene. Morning again, Mike.
Morning.
Nice to have you again.
It's lovely to be back.
Now, when I was growing up,
Yeah.
which was quite a while ago now, but my mother is still the same. I mean, you know, I'm a bit of a mummy's boy. I openly admit that. But one of the things that, without a doubt, I learned from my mother, I still learn from her, is manners. And even though when I was very young, we were dirt poor.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, my parents ended up doing okay under Thatcher, but before that, I remember, you know, them sharing a meal and saying that they weren't hungry and things like that. You know, I never was allowed out when they used to go shopping with them without wearing like trousers and a shirt, because I had to. Because my mum was like, "You're going out to town with me. You will look good. You know, you're not going to wear your trackies and whatever." She still gets. She taught me that when she gets to a door, even when I was a child, I open it for her, and she goes through first. That I get up. Or ask to be excused from the table when a lady comes into. You don't refer to someone as a woman; you refer to them as a lady. Comes into a room, you stand up, especially if you're meeting them for the first time. All that stuff was drummed into me. This report today on the front page of the Times says that apparently that's now, when it comes to raising children, way down the list. Obedience, manners, all this sort of stuff, no longer important. A child's independence is more important. What do you make of that?
Well,
You're a parent yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, I did read that this morning on the front of the Times, and this survey, I mean, saying that they don't believe that discipline should be taught in schools and so on. And I think, well, it wouldn't be so bad if they taught it at home, but I was a governor at a primary school, and we would literally get letters from parents to the governors saying, would you mind telling children they have to go to bed at 11:30 because they won't listen to us, and things like that. We had children come in at 5 that still couldn't wipe their bum or use a knife and fork because they'd only ever had finger food in front of the telly. So it wouldn't be so bad if parents were saying we didn't expect this from school, if they themselves were teaching the children any kind of behaviour that was setting them up for life. But, you know, it's like you, and I've got more grey hair, so I'm even older, there's nothing wrong with a bit of healthy fear/respect for policemen, for teachers, for that system that is going to add to your parents' upbringing.
I feared my parents. I respected them, but I feared them. My mum, I remember when I was 15, I snuck to a nightclub in London, my first time at a nightclub, and my mum found out, and she came.
Oh dear.
To the club. She dragged me off the dance floor and dragged me home. I mean, it was the National in Kilburn. I mean,
so it's obviously still hanging in there.
Oh, yeah, it's haunting still, you. It does haunt me. And she was absolutely. She got my brother to drive her down, and she, like, I don't know how she got past the bouncers, but I think she said, my 15-year-old son is in there, went in there. And I was like, you know, oh my God, I'm so cool, I'm in a nightclub. And then suddenly my mother is there and drags me off, drags me home. Those sorts of things, I just don't know if that happens that as much anymore.
I don't believe it does. And partly, I guess, more parents are both working, so some children are being parented less at home. There's more distractions with different channels and different Netflix and their phones, and so a lot of children are, I think, their nanny is the TV. They're stuck in front of the TV a lot, so they're not getting that discipline, that structure, those lessons at home.
But to what extent do you think actually that although I think ultimately the buck does stop with parents, to what extent do you think that the changes that we've had in society contribute to this? Because you do raise a really good point, in as much as, you know, that back then, you know, that you could probably just have one parent working. There would be a parent at home. Not in my case, actually, because my dad worked nights. So Monday to Friday, I wouldn't see much of my dad. I mean, me and my brother were raised a lot by my mum because my dad was always working or sleeping. But nowadays, housing pressures, you know, the cost of housing, wages not being as high, all of these things contribute to two parents no longer being there, divorce rate being much higher. To what extent are we being perhaps a little bit unfair because of the other pressures that are around parenting.
Well, I think even because there's those other pressures around parenting, and the study said that it dropped from, in 1990, 42% of parents saying they should be disciplined and taught discipline and so on in school and good manners, to only 12% now. If those parents are under ever more pressure, all the more reason why some of that should and could be taught in schools, because actually they're spending 7, 8 disciplined hours in school in an environment with different adults where they can get good role model, good lesson and good structure. And if we're not expecting them to have that discipline, the quote is quite telling in here. Professor Bobby Duffy, the Policy Institute at King's College London, said, "This doesn't mean we want a society of self-centred children. This reflects more a general shift towards valuing self-expression." I mean, there is this thing where we're telling children that they can force their opinion, they can almost do what they like. Well, if they're becoming a young adult, I kind of get that. No, but when they're tiny children, they haven't earned the right yet.
You haven't earned the right to self-expression. I mean, you know, self-expression within boundaries.
Exactly.
That's the
point. But if no one's teaching the boundaries, where do we go with it?
Because what is self-expression? Well, self-expression is actually running around a supermarket and knocking people over. Self-expression is being really loud in a restaurant when you're trying to have a quiet meal with your partner at the next table. You could say, well, look, that's Tarquin expressing himself. No, I don't want Tarquin to express himself.
Tarquin not annoying everyone else.
Tarquin to sit there and be quiet, but also I want the parents to have thought, right, Tarquin's going to be in the restaurant.
Yeah.
Let's, you know, that might be an occasion where I'd say, right, well, then he can have the iPad for a bit. Now, again, I'm not really in favour of children and smartphones that much. I think they should know how to use them, but it should be controlled. So maybe that's a time. Maybe that's a time where you actually sit and play a game with your child, so that therefore the child is amused, so that you're not. But the thing is, I think a lot of parents now just sort of, they have the children there, but it's their time. They want to unwind, and they.
But I think also there's an increase in parents calling their kid buddy or mate or something. It's like, no, you're the parent. You know, there's a hierarchy here that is healthy for them to have. But the other extension of this is, if teachers are not allowed or told that schools shouldn't be doing any discipline or teaching those manners, that we hear that teachers are leaving education in droves.
Should teachers be teaching manners, though?
Well, they should be trying to enforce some of those disciplines and structure, I think, because if teachers are leaving in droves, all the time we're being told by unions and the left that it's because of bad pay. Teachers get more pay pro rata than they ever did. If you look at it, my daughter was going to be a teacher, but I think they're leaving more because the kids are awful to them. They have no respect for them. They ignore, you know, the teachers there, and they almost have to ask for permission of the children to teach them. And we've lost control.
I remember a couple of times. This makes my mother sound like an absolute harridan, and she wasn't, but she just was tough.
Tough love.
She was really tough with me and my brother. But I remember a couple of times I'd be like, the teacher's bullied me, the teacher's been horrible to me, and my mum would say, well, what did you do?
Exactly. Yeah.
Not she would support the teacher, and whereas nowadays it's right, I'm going up to school. My little Henrietta, the poor little thing, the teacher's being horrible to it. No, it's you support the teacher as your first call, and then, you know, if
you at least investigate, don't you?
At least investigate.
And find out, yeah.
Once, and this is terrible, once I remember when I was growing up, I wouldn't eat my porridge. And my mum threatened. She said, I'll put the porridge on your head. You don't eat it. And I said, no, you won't. She said, yes, I will. I said, no, you won't. And she took the bowl of porridge and she put it on my head, and I had porridge all going down my face. But I tell you something, I ate the porridge every single day after that.
But we could go on with this forever, because talking about porridge made me think about the fact that if we're saying that parents think they should be the people teaching structure and manners and that, we're suggesting they're good parents. The reality is, in schools now, there are things like they're breakfast clubs, because a lot of kids aren't getting breakfast before they go, so they can't get the brain sugars, so they can't think, so they can't concentrate.
How can you
because parents have sent them to school without breakfast.
How? See, that irritates me. I'm sorry. I've realised there's a cost of living crisis, and I realise like free school meals for some people are really essential, but it irritates me.
But it's happening a lot. And
how can you send your child to school?
You've got chains like Greggs having to support their local schools in breakfast clubs because the parents aren't doing it. Now,
what does it take?
There are great parents out there, but too many aren't.
A piece of toast. I'm sorry.
There's no excuse.
I don't understand. Like, how can you not afford that? I mean, maybe I live a completely sheltered life, but a loaf of bread for a couple of pieces of toast in the morning.
Well, just something to get their blood sugars
How
up so
could
they've
you
got some energy.
send your child to school without that? Maybe I've got too much of an old-fashioned view, but I just don't get it.
Yeah.
All right, let's also talk about... Oh, here we go. Margaret says the reason children are badly behaved is because they are not given boundaries that are enforced. It is hard work to discipline them, says Margaret. Thank you very much indeed for that one as well. Let's talk about HS2. Oh, here we go. Robert as well. I think we were at a certain age, we were brought back stricter, where we were the child and our parents ruled, but now the world's so upside down and the children sometimes rule the parents. That picks up on what you're saying about, we're all friends. No, we're not.
Yeah.
No, we're not.
We're setting them up for the future. We're giving them some structure, some boundaries, some life lessons for the future.
Boundaries. OK, HS2, that's on the front pages today as well, and apparently it won't go past Birmingham now, or there's a danger it won't. I mean, I'm in favour of HS2 because I think this is something that will put us in good stead for the next 50 years. And I think that the problem that we have with the railways in this country is a lack of competition and a lack of capacity. I don't care about the speed, it's the capacity. And I think if a government is giving us infrastructure where at the moment we have too many people and not enough infrastructure, we should grab it with both hands. Do you agree? And is it pointless if it doesn't go beyond Birmingham?
Well, let's go back a little bit. We start with the need. Is the need for it there? And I think when it was first conceived, there was the need. There were more and more people commuting, more and more people going into the cities, going into the towns, trying to come into London to get that London waiting, that benefit of maybe a higher salary. Roll forward a few years, and as we come back post-COVID, and I live about an hour north of London, so I'm often in the train, I'm often going to Scotland, I spend a lot of time on trains. They are not even half as empty as they were pre-COVID. And I don't see that changing very quickly because so many people who used to commute are now saying, I want a home work. In fact, you've covered stories yourself about the fact that companies can't get their home workers back to the office. So I came in this morning, OK, it was early, but I've been in at peak hours in recent weeks, and they're not even half full.
Did you stay in London last night?
No, came down 3:23 train. It's ungodly hour, but I'm an early bird, I don't mind.
And so when you come down that hour out of London, I mean, you don't mind saying sort of the area that...
No, I live in Peterborough.
Yeah. You're saying that the trains aren't as full even at peak times as they were?
No, and Peterborough used to have a full train every sort of 15 minutes. It's a big commuter city. And I put a post on a few weeks ago when I was coming in on that kind of 7:30 train that gets you to King's Cross for 8:20, so great for people working in the office at 9 o'clock. It was empty. There are so many... There's an epidemic of people not getting back to the office. Yeah. Well, even those that is now becoming hybrid in reality, and I think it's something we need to get used to, people are maybe doing 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, and they're swapping those days around. But there is not the same demand for train travel that there was even 3 years ago.
But I guess people who get the East Coast Main Line, the West Coast Main Line, all of those would say, well, look, that's not the case for us. We see the pictures online of people who are sitting out, on the floor in the vestibule outside the toilets and stuff. That is still happening on some...
But often that's when there's been delays or there's been cancellations and things like that. I mean, the other issue we got with trains is if we're going to run them, make them affordable for the people who need to travel on them.
Well, that's
it's like 200 quid to come in and back from Peterborough at peak times now, if you want to go first class, or 130 standard.
I don't know why.
That's like £8,000 a year for a standard class season ticket.
I don't know why we don't just have just two fares for every day, a peak fare and an off-peak fare. And that is it. You can reserve a seat on either, but if you want to get a different train, because that's the other stupid thing, is that, you do an advance fare, and then you finished your work early, and you want to get the train, and they say, no, well, if it's a different train, I should pay the difference in price, and I don't get a seat, because I reserved a seat on another one, but I can get on that train. It is so complicated, and the fact that you reserve a train at a time and then you want to get on another one, and I've been chucked off trains when I've gone on at a different time.
But the airlines do that now, don't they? You pay an admin fee and the difference in price.
So I should be able to get on that train, sit in a seat. When they come around and do the ticket, I'll say, look, I had a ticket for the one that's in an hour's time. They say, right, OK, 25 quid, you can stay on this train, 20 quid, and you can be on this train. And if it doesn't cost more than the original fare on that new train, then people won't fiddle it. Because, you know...
But specific to the HS2, you know, it's £100 billion it's costing now. It's out of all proportion to what it was, in a time when we've got a completely bankrupt country with lots of things to address. So I'm not saying it wouldn't be a great north-south connection, and I myself don't want the whole government focused on London, but we've got to look at the cost, we've got to look at the need, and I don't think the demand is there like it used to be, because the trains aren't full most of the time to and from Peterborough. And we've got to ask ourselves the question, is it serving the best way to spend those funds that the taxpayers are working hard for?
All right, well, it's an interesting one. I've got some good tweets on this. When we come back, let's talk about an interesting angle you've got, actually, on the immigration story from yesterday, Labour's policy on this and how they plan on dealing with the migrant crisis, and perhaps a knock-on effect that we haven't considered this morning, which we'll discuss in just a moment, all here live on Talk TV.
Good evening, I'm Piers Morgan, uncensored in New York City.
Yeah.
King Piers and King Q.
I think it's only room for one king, man. You know what I'm saying?
He's mocked your weight, Trump.
Yeah, look at him. Fail. Stop working.
Just because they're skin folk don't mean they're kin folk.
Do you believe you can win this war?
You're making me cry again.
They're trying to force you out.
Yes, I feel betrayed.
Keep it award-winning. Mwah.
Lucy Letby will die behind bars.
And a senior doctor who first raised concerns about Letby wants NHS managers to be regulated.
We needed answers a lot sooner. This is, what, 7 years down the line? I mean, it's completely ludicrous.
We need accountability, we need performance in all walks of life.
If this nurse had misgendered somebody on a ward, she'd have been out the door.
When they first got together, there were press stories, weighty Katie.
That would make her a better Princess of Wales.
Ghislaine Maxwell agreed to be interviewed for the very first time.
I honestly wish I'd never met him.
Donald Trump has just said he expects to be arrested at 7:30 p.m.
The Conservative Party can certainly win the next election.
Can we?
Yes,
Labour
absolutely.
29 points ahead in the polls. Can we?
Did he say, yes, I have taken drugs and they bent the rules, or lied on the visa application form and therefore got it?
There needs to be an intervention around abortion laws.
Parliament is sovereign. Parliament can determine these things.
The rest of the world has watched on in sort of mounting horror as this story has unravelled. For you, it was incredibly personal.
The death toll from the Titanic tragedy has risen to 1,522, and may God rest their souls.
Let it roll!
If we stop producing oil, the knock-on effect is far larger than just CO2.
I nearly have empathy when I'm speaking to them. I know now you're probably going to boot me off the short in this go. Oh, Meghan Markle, about Meghan Markle. Some of them, they're easily led.
You can kiss my American ass. Thank you very much. Very nice of you.
Twitter, you sons of... Can you please reinstate my account?
Yeah,
Thank you.
There's a threat that you'd be worried about.
So are you saying that you're being overwhelmed, that you're inundated? We are really working hard for you. We're just asking patients to be patient with us.
We're now in Barbie world. You weren't asked to give evidence to the grand jury.
I'm the only one that has been telling the truth.
You don't drink, never taken drugs. You're stinking rich. Should we be concerned, Prime Minister?
If it's on your mind, it's on Talk TV.
It's about you and your opinions.
If you're thinking about it,
We're talking about it.
It's all about me. That was a joke.
Morning, Cristo here on Talk TV. So, still joined by Mike Greene, secret millionaire and entrepreneur. Now, you wanted to talk about this story, which has had a mixed reaction yesterday. Actually, let's talk about one of the front pages on this, because I thought it summed it up quite well on the Starmer plan for immigration. The Guardian this morning saying, criticised by both the left and the right over the plan to end the small boats crisis. For anyone who doesn't know this story, Keir Starmer came up with the plan for immigration. One of them was to treat the people traffickers like using terror legislation, meaning that you can freeze their bank accounts and stop them moving in between different countries. Also wanted to negotiate with the EU a new deal to be able to send back asylum seekers that had their application rejected, but refused to rule out that that could mean needing to do a deal with the EU where we take a quota of refugees that haven't actually even landed on our shores, that perhaps ended up in Greece or Italy or all those places. So many people are saying, well, hang on, what's the point in having this kind of deal if we would end up with a quota here? So still some reaction coming in about that. What's your take on this story, Mike?
Yeah, well, you know, all of the parties are a mess when it comes to immigration, is the reality. But when I look at that, it's like, what's the best way to deal with illegal boats coming across? Make them legal. It's virtually said, you don't have to come across on a boat now, we'll take 120,000 of you anyway. Now, when we put that into perspective, that's like every single year having the equivalent of cities like Maidstone, Eastbourne, Colchester, Exeter, Cheltenham, Lincoln, Dagenham.
Every year.
Every year. That many people coming in. And he's saying, we'll do that, we'll agree to that with the EU. Now, in addition, we have had a net 600,000 migration last year. Where I connect it to the problem isn't that we don't need people or want to be close-minded and not welcome people, but we've only built an average of 100,000 homes every year since 2010.
And I think that's a really interesting angle, talking about the housing, because, of course, the pressures on housing, I mean, everything's connected today, what we're talking about when it comes to children's manners, but also that is another reason why something like HS2, to me, seems necessary, because again it's the infrastructure that we've never kept up with the number of people in this country, and I think that doesn't make you a person who isn't compassionate or sympathetic to the needs of people who are genuine, but I think that we need to, it's a numbers game, and at some point a government needs to look after the people who are here already, including migrants, actually, because they're not getting any services. We're all not getting public services that we need. So how does this affect? Because yesterday it was announced, wasn't it, as well, that Labour had blocked this plan to build all of these homes that Michael Gove wanted to build. But bizarrely and stupidly, those homes they wanted to build them relaxed the rules about pollution in rivers, which I thought was ridiculously stupid, because, of course...
desperation, isn't it?
Well, we've got all these issues with sewage in our rivers and things.
You know, to me, I used to have a research business here, America, Australia, New Zealand, so I look at the numbers. The numbers are, our population since 2010 has grown by 3.5 million. We've only built 1.3 million homes in that time, OK? We've had people getting divorced sooner, living longer, so the housing demand is increasing. Because we've not built them, that's putting more and more pressure to put rents up, because there's more demand, supply and demand.
Also, we're dying
it's all connecting
less
to make it harder for people to live.
And we're dying less. I mean, we're also living longer. So therefore, even if we were keeping up with the population with the number of houses we were building, which we've woefully not done, we're still not keeping up with the fact that the natural flow of people no longer being alive to live in their accommodation is also changing.
And they used to sort some of these immigration issues out in 15 weeks. Now it's taking 2 years. We're having to house these people for 2 years. If they're illegal, they're not allowed to work during that time. So we're looking after them. We're putting them in plush hotels. Whilst we were talking about schools earlier, I'm sure you went to a school that probably had a prefab or a mobile garden. We've still got that in many of our schools. So it's okay to put our kids in a temporary building for 10 years, but we can't put illegal immigrants in anything other than a plush hotel.
And I completely acknowledge and agree with that, but also, it sticks in my craw a little bit that the government are the ones saying, well, look, we're going to be tough on this and sort it all out, when they are the ones that have overseen this backlog. There was not a backlog anywhere like this when they took over in 2010.
It's a farce, and nobody wants to really address it. I mean, I heard someone say a couple of days ago, this is becoming such an issue that's driving rents, that's driving crime, it's driving so much of our life. The government, whoever's in, should be worrying about this and focusing on it from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to sleep and beyond. But they're not.
Well, the Tories have failed on it because of the fact that the waiting lists being so long has driven needing to put people up for longer, meaning that they're spending a fortune on the bill. So any saving they might have made by cutting back on the during austerity has surely been lost.
£6 million a day.
A lot of people look at Labour and say, well, clearly we don't trust them, and clearly if Keir Starmer can't rule out needing to take 100,000, as you say, or however many from the EU. So if you are a voter in the next election worried about immigration, if that's one of your top three that you're worried about, who on earth would you vote for? Who would you vote for that's got a realistic chance of becoming a government?
And when I read that headline, it did make me think, what's the saying, from the jaws of success we stole defeat.